So in the last video, we had a look at the sort of scientific frame and some of the science that's backing up this idea that there's something more going on than maybe we first thought, or you know, post the Louis XVI's commission. And I've always had this idea that something was lost in that conversion from mesmerism into suggestive therapeutics and hypnosis and these things. So in this esoteric frame, it's exactly that. This is just another way of looking at it. And for me, understanding lots of different ways that I can present this is sort of fundamental to being able to work with multiple different types of people, because you can pick which frame to present something in based on what you've seen from their belief systems. So you can pace and lead them into an understanding of this. And so there's a few aspects of this that are touching on quantum theory and some esoteric metaphysical ideas. Um, One of them is the idea of the quantum field and quantum reality, and another one is an idea of the Trinity within man. So um, there's a lot of different belief systems, religions, spiritual disciplines around the world that have this idea of a trinity in man. And this is even in modern psychology, the conscious, the unconscious, and the superconscious mind. You know, we can look at Freud and Jung and thank them for these labels. But it's a new set of labeling for something that's been known about for centuries, millennia. So let's tackle the quantum aspect first and have a look at that, and then we'll move on to the Trinity in man and how that ties in. So essentially, matter doesn't exist. It's energy and information vibrating at a specific frequency that reflects light. So the subatomic particles that make up the atoms of our universe are phasing in and out of reality at a fast enough rate that we don't really notice them. It feels solid. It looks solid to us. It's like this screen that you're watching, it looks like a video of me moving and talking. But what it actually is a series of photographs played so fast that your mind sees them as fluid movement. If we slow down the frame rate, that'll become more jittery. If we speed up the frame rate, it smooths out, and we can use like 60 frames a second. We can slow that down to 30 frames a second and get half speed video. And this is your high speed videos, etc. So reality is like that, in actual fact, if we sort of scale it up, we can think of it like this cup. These subatomic particles are disappearing from reality and then reappearing in reality. The only way they can do that is if there's a blueprint that tells it to reappear in this reality as a cup instead of a cat or a roll of tape. You know, the there has to be an energy and information framework that remanifesting in physical reality is bound to, a blueprint, so to speak, in energy and information. And if we look at Einstein's theory of energy equals mass times the square of the speed of light, energy is on one side, and on the other side we have mass multiplied by the square of light, the speed of light squared. So the amount of energy in something, which is energy and information, is a factor of the speed of light squared, bigger than the actual matter there. So if all of this stuff that we experience as solid, real universe out there is actually part of it's our mind. Our experience of the universe is in our mind. So our mind essentially holds a copy of our entire universe in it, from what we think of as the Big Bang to the end of possible time. The reality out there is a sea of energy information that we perceive as a physical reality, but it's not actually a physical reality. It's both like this idea of the particle and the wave. I was going to suggest it's like both the particle and the wave, but really the particle is our experience of it, the collapsed into reality. And the potentiality, the wave, is what's actually out there. And this is the observer effect. When we're observing the world around us, that energy and information in the wave collapses into the reality that we perceive. I hope that makes sense. So, out there beyond the veil of our senses is a sea of energy and information that we call the quantum field. And the thoughts that we have in our mind of, oh, that's a table I'm looking at, are also made of energy and information. Our body is also made of this energy and information that we perceive as being a physical thing. So when we think of things like that, we can understand that if energy and information, the thoughts that our minds create, are just energy and information, the impulse to move an arm is energy and information traveling from our brain down our physical arm, and making us move our hand or our fingers. All of this stuff is just energy and information. And as such, it's all connected. It's this sea of energy and information that we perceive as physical reality. So there's no separation. All there is energy and information. Is that consciousness? So many different systems around the world have said that the universe is mental. The universe is a mind. It's a virtual reality. It's a simulation. It's a dream. You know, the Maya, the illusion of reality is what we experience. But the real reality out there is a conscious mind that manifests within as it interacts with our mind. So from that model, we can look at the idea of time as being an evolution of the information in the universe. And the only thing that actually exists is the now. The past doesn't exist, it never did. The future doesn't exist, it never will. All that exists is now. And that movement of energy and information as it evolves is what we experience as the progression of time. So basically, the idea here is that the universe is a mental quantum field that we perceive as physical reality. In the Trinity of Man, the Holy Trinity of Man, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, if you want to use the Christian analogy, we can use the middle self, low self, and high self if we were to talk the Huna system. You know, various different systems around the world have had this idea of a Trinity. And it's a very useful framework, especially for the sort of stuff that we're doing with mesmerism. Because, and even hypnosis as well, because it allows us a model. And it is just that. Like, it might be real, it might not, it doesn't matter, but it's a useful construct, a useful model to work with for this. So the idea is that the conscious mind can communicate with the subconscious mind, which is a separate mind, a low self and a middle self. The high self, the superconscious mind, it resides outside the physical body in the sea of potentiality of the universe. So it's actually living in that space, whereas the conscious and subconscious are within the body. Now, the idea also is that the superconscious, which has access to all of the information in the universe, is only accessible by the low self, the subconscious. So, in order for the practitioner, the huna, the kahuna, whatever, magician, to be able to access supernormal information, They have to be able to communicate effectively with their low self to be able to ask the low self to gain access from the high self of that information. The low self has an ability to communicate telepathically. This is all the Huna belief system here. So, in order for us to produce a healing effect, if the universe itself is made of life force, if the universe itself is made of consciousness, of energy and information, that mana, that energy and information, that life force, that prana, that magnetism, that vital fluidum that Mesmer's talking about could be thought forms and consciousness itself, and the ability to build constructs within our mind that are solid enough for us to be able to access them easily. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the idea of a memory palace is really good because if we take something like a path that we walked when we were younger that we know really well, that's well ingrained in our subconscious mind, the thought form there, because we walked it every day, we learned it every day as we walked it, the construct of that thought form, of that piece of a map within our psyche, is extremely strong compared to maybe a road we walked down once. The thought form associated with that's very weak. And as such, if we try and peg information in that weak path that we only walked on once, the chances are we won't remember it. But if we peg information into the thought form that we built through repetition over a long time, that's this strong thought form, this part of the map that we walked when we were a kid, then it'll store forever. And it's dependent on how we build the stuff we're putting into those locations, but it's a really important aspect of um, how memory works. So this idea of building thought forms, I've given that first memory palace that I used, which was the path from my home to where we got the bus to school. I've worked with that a lot. It's built a strong thought form. It has a big astral entity attached to it, an astral form attached to it, a mental form attached to it. And so it's a strong thought form. Now, if I have an extremely powerful thought form built with lots of different ideas about how it might work, so maybe the scientific frame that I gave speaks really well to the logic and reason part of my mind. But the magical spiritual part of my mind much prefers this more esoteric perspective. And then there's the cross layering of what I'm talking about here with things like Pusager's theories and Mesmer's theories. And I'm seeing how I can adapt them to fit with this so that all of it fits together really nicely. That's building a thought form. It's building a belief system around this that's strong and has an element of density to it within my mind. And so when we're using this with mesmerism, what we're doing here with will and intent and a desire to help this individual heal and the set and setting of the session, all of this is building these thought forms. The client has one because they've decided to come and see you. The therapist has one as well because you have to believe that you can help this client. There's a few things that we'll go into in actually using these techniques, whether it's hypnosis or mesmerism, that show you how to work with that. But essentially, what we're doing with all of this is building these thought forms. And this, if the Huna theories are correct, should signal to the low self that we want to use the life force energy, the consciousness energy, the thought form energy to work with this individual and help them heal. That stream of Reiki energy, magnetic energy from the universe, the plenum, the universal currents, whichever system you want to talk about this in, whether it's Reiki, Poisagers, thought, directed will and belief, or Mesmer's ideas of this universal fluid, all of them tie in really well. The focus of the thought form that we're building, if that fluid that Mesmer was talking about is actually the consciousness flow within the universe, the forcing of a focused intent, all of it is signaling to this, like, are we just building a thought form here? Does that thought form actually create the power from this universal consciousness to overpower the thought form of disease that's held in the physical body of the other? There's a piece of gold. So the the idea here is that as we're building these thought forms, as we're holding this will and intent, that what we're doing here is going to heal this person. It's going to work with them. This is going to open up everything that they need to allow themselves to heal. And this idea, like whatever it is that allows you to build that thought form, will help this flow of energy. And there's almost a sort of fail-safe in this as well, in that if you're not being fully congruent with how you're working, if there's a part of you that's working through the ego, and the that part's looking to serve itself, it's going to block or reduce access to that current of energy that's available through the higher self and the lower self, because they don't hold the ego's view of the world. So there has to be a congruency, is what I'm saying here. You have to be congruent with what you're doing. If you don't believe you can help this client, then refer them to someone you think can help them, because as soon as you don't believe that you can help them, that's blocking that flow of consciousness energy. If we're in this frame. Now, this frame might just be a load of woo-woo hokum bullshit to you, and that's fine. Just drop it if it is. It's just a construct. It's just a frame. But essentially what I'm saying here is this frame involves the universe being a conscious mind, us not perceiving that real universe, but perceiving a version of the universe within our own mind, and the control of focus, attention, belief, consciousness itself in directing the movement of thought forms and astral forms, if we want to call them that, into overpowering the thought forms that are there holding the illness. And this esoteric view that I've presented here, I think, fits perfectly with Mesmer and Marquess de Puysegur, and fits in with all of the scientific stuff that I gave you before. And as far as I can tell, this is the best way I can explain it all just now, because in my world, consciousness is prime and everything else is secondary. Energy and information is prime, matter secondary. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a different frame to look at all of this. We'll go into it more. If there's any questions on this, if there's anything that you didn't feel was clear, feel free to chuck a comment in the comments, or drop me a message on here and go, hey, this bit in that video, what were you meaning by that? Or can you answer this question? Like, come back to me on it. I'll try and write this up as best I can and chuck it down below as well. So hopefully that will maybe answer some of the questions as well for you. And I shall see you in the next one.